Hello and welcome to the Cradle News Roundup, your one-stop shop for all news West Asia. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I am the head of news for the Cradle. As usual, I'm joined by my colleagues, content creator and writer for the Cradle, Karim Shami, and columnist and editor for the Cradle, Sharmin Irwani. Let's start with Rafah, with what happened in Rafah over the past 24 hours. The Israelis, from what I read overnight, they dropped about 40 airstrikes in this area of Gaza, where at least 1.4 million Palestinians have taken shelter of. If you see the satellite images of Rafah before a few months ago, it's essentially empty. It's like a regular city, not a lot of activity going on. Today, covered in tents, covered in shelters, like sardines inside a can. This is where they're dropping bombs now. And this comes just as the ceasefire deal came apart. This is a ceasefire that Hamas gave a 3-stage proposal, and the Israelis said, "No, this would be disastrous for us." That's what they said. This would be a catastrophe for Israel. So we are so close to defeating them. That's what they keep saying. We're so close. We're going into Rafah now because this is supposedly the last bastion of the resistance. There's only so many brigades. We're gonna defeat them. This is the rhetoric. A U.S. Intel report from last week says they're actually not any close to defeating Hamas than they've been for the past 4 or 5 months at this point. The Israeli budget for this year, it predicts a long war, at the very least, throughout this year. So, what are the Israelis trying to sell? And the stuff in Rafah is essentially what was predicted from the beginning. They said it themselves, we just need to push them into the Sinai desert. Or let Europeans take care of it, let whoever take care of it, we just want the land.
Let's be honest here. I mean, Netanyahu and co never wanted a ceasefire deal. They're getting a lot of pressure internationally to come up with some kind of a deal. But you can't just do a deal. It has to make both of the parties somewhat happy. Hamas's response to the sort of powers deal hammered out by the American and Israeli intelligence services, plus the French, plus Qatar and Egypt, was very vague. Palestinians now have lived through Oslo and the false promises of Oslo. And they know that in order to have a deal that sticks, you really have to make it very precise. So Hamas and the Palestinian resistance, when they saw the Paris Agreement, weren't going to have it. They weren't going to agree to something that was very generalized. They wanted specifics. So here's a time frame. I mean, anyone who does a deal for business understands this. You have a time frame and you have deliverables, and those two components are important in any deal. And so Hamas's response was very pragmatic and fair. It just spelled out details.
It was very thorough.
It was thorough, exactly. Here are the deadlines and here are the terms, things that need to be met during each phase of this, whereas the original Paris proposal was vague. So the Israelis don't want this. I don't know if they actually said no way to the deal, but they made sure they sunk the deal by attacking Rafah last night, because Hamas had said, during days of Israeli threats of hitting Gaza, that if you strike Gaza, the deal's off the table. There can be no ceasefire agreement because this is over and beyond.
Yeah, when the Israelis did say, like Netanyahu came out and said, we can't take this deal. It would be catastrophic for us. And then, the big news item in Israeli media right now is they rescued two captives from Rafah, and like heroic welcome, so on and so forth. They aired an ad on the Super Bowl saying, bring them back, bring the hostages back. What Hamas proposed in their deal was for a prisoner exchange situation. In the very first 45 days, they would exchange all the elderly, all the women, all the sick, all the children, if there's still any children. And then, as it went on, they would continue exchange. The Israelis, from October 7th, have done little to nothing to actually get their captives out of Gaza.
This is what the captive families, say about this. Israel has no interest in hitting in releasing or gaining the release of the captives if it means giving an inch. As far as Israel is concerned, they are likely collateral damage and not even significant collateral damage. And there was an article last week or was it a leak, where they showed how Netanyahu's team had stage managed a captive family meeting to bring in right-wing family members at the end, who hijacked the meeting and said, I love my son or I love my daughter, but I have to do what's good for Israel, and really tried to sway that meeting to impress upon the other families that you have to take the sacrifice for the greater good of Israel. And that was quite shocking, so the right now, the Israelis are not, Netanyahu and co are not interested in the hostage. They're a thorn in their side more than anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and because we've seen massive protests. I think over the weekend there were like 100,000 people in Tel Aviv. And also this is not really getting a lot of news coverage because, well, as you said, it seems like just the goal right now is destroy Hamas. But what they really mean by destroy Hamas is just kill as many Palestinians as you can and push the rest into the desert.
The goal that they put over this operation or over this aggression that they are doing in Gaza is that their aim is to destroy Hamas. And it's clearly they can destroy Hamas. And the same goal they put in 2006, and they said that they are going to destroy Hezbollah, and they didn't succeed. And after several years, we saw that Hezbollah gained power and gained popularity. And that's what I'm seeing will happen after the war ends. Hamas will gain popularity, and at the end of the war, we'll see Hamas being stronger and stronger by the years.
I mean, it's what happened with Al-Qaeda. It's what happened with ISIS. It's what happened, when they went after Ansar Allah in Yemen. It's what happened with Hezbollah. Iran's ascendance, like massive ascendance in this region, comes from maximum pressure sanctions. It comes from, years of sabotage activities, bombings, and fires, mysterious bombings and fires in Iranian cities, from assassination attempts and successful assassinations against military commanders and civilian nuclear scientists. Iran's just grown in strength. Hezbollah's just grown in strength. Ansar Allah has just grown in strength. And not just grown in strength and popularity, but in terms of military capabilities. They've gone from strength to strength, truly, right, qualitatively and quantitatively, So what do you say about a nation that constructs policies that haven't changed a whit over decades and, have always led to catastrophic ends, but they continue to pursue these policies? It's mind-boggling from our perspective here in the region. And now we're looking, let's be honest, like we're here in Beirut, we've seen a sudden escalation on the northern front, on Palestine's northern front with Hezbollah in Lebanon, that has been marked by a number of new kinds of Israeli attacks deeper and deeper into the Lebanese state, to areas that are not warranted, civilian areas.
Yeah, exactly, because the fighting's in the border. The fighting in the south, that's where Hezbollah's forces are located. This is what the Western officials that keep coming to Lebanon keep demanding, push them back behind the Litani River. And now Israel is just flying above, they're flying above northern Lebanon, they're flying above central Lebanon. We see the jet streams. And they bombed central Lebanon on Saturday when the Iranian foreign minister was here. They tried to kill this Hamas, allegedly, this Hamas commander, who apparently survived. Now, as we're recording this, a few hours ago, they bombed the area of Bin Jibel, which is closer to the south, again, trying to kill a Hezbollah commander. So they keep doing this. It just keeps escalating, and it's just a palpable feeling that there's really nothing that can be done to stop them.
I just want to say, the fact that Israel, in the middle of a hot war on two of its borders, is reverting to its failed assassination policies. It's kind of stunning. It's like a desperate maneuver, thinking, of course. And, everybody, by the way, here and other parts of the region who are hyper-focused on Gaza and hyper-focused on the war in the north are talking about how Israel's big play is going to be trying to assassinate Yahya Sinwar, who is the Hamas leader inside Gaza. The guy who pushed the resistance part of the Palestinian Islamic resistance. And is tight with the rest of the resistance axis. So Israel, of course, perceives that by killing him, they can claim a victory over Gaza, because one of their stated goals is to remove Hamas. And what better than to cut off the head of the snake, as they often say, But Yahya Sinwar, every single time they try to assassinate top officials in the resistance axis, the resistance axis gets stronger. I still can't forget the fact that when the Americans assassinated the IRGC Quds Force commander Qasem Soleimani and the Hashtag deputy commander Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes, right after that, we had an Iranian reaction, military reaction, that Qasem Soleimani never led, which was 24 ballistic missiles, targeted ballistic missiles hitting U.S. military bases. What global South country has ever done this to the global hegemon? Nobody. So Qasem Soleimani was killed, but the IRGC stepped it up. What stopped? Nothing stopped, And, I would argue that the IRGC sort of solidified behind this, just as Hamas will, just as Hezbollah has, in the past. So, they can go down that well-trodden path and reach nothing. And this is, strangely enough, what they're looking to do in Lebanon by going well beyond the accepted rules of engagement that naturally happen and coalesce during military confrontations. They've gone deeper into Lebanon, well into central Lebanon now, and expanded their assassination policy and are constantly banging the war drums about escalating the conflict inside Lebanon. But now, the Israelis, we saw this week, there was the release of 150, 130-page document that...
a study.
A report that was a collaboration of 6 think tanks, about 100 officials, many defense officials, academics, and government officials. And it basically concluded that a war with Hezbollah, you were going to see a couple things straight away. There would be Hezbollah missile salvos, non-targeted and targeted missile salvos against major Israeli targets. But 2,500 to 3,000 missiles a day at one shot. And these would not just be, randomly hitting Israel. It would hit important military targets, including the Iron Dome installations, which is Israel's supposed defense. It's at best, a quasi-defense. It's not been able to handle salvos of missiles, maybe individual ones. So to take those capabilities out, and you have an essentially defenseless Israel. But interestingly, and we're talking about small land masses in Lebanon and in Israel, right? So Hezbollah will absolutely target Israel's Air Force capabilities by either taking out grounded aircraft, right? And of course they know where they are. Or the landing strips and takeoff strips, right, for Israeli fighter jets, which means Israel then cannot operate in the skies, which is what they essentially did in the 2006 war with Lebanon. And then what? Are Israelis going to genuinely send troops, a ground force into Lebanon? Do they not remember what happened last time? Hezbollah established a 1-to-1 kill ratio that had never been done before against Israeli forces.
Yeah, and especially in 2006, Hezbollah members were few. They were somehow like less than 10,000 fighters, as Hassan said in a speech. And recently he said that now they are more than 100,000. So Israel, so 2006 till today, maybe the power of Israel increased maybe 5%, 6%, but the power of Hezbollah increased tenfold.
And their missile arsenal.
Yeah, of course, it's more accurate. I think like 4 days ago, Hezbollah released a video of a missile that they used on a Merkava tank. And this is the first time they used something like this. And we see the missile goes up, okay, and the footage is from the missile. The missile goes up, sees the site, the Germans, and there's a Merkava, and then it dives in the middle of the Merkava. And we see everything live on video.
This is the Almas?
I think so.
Okay, because the Almas, we did a story at the Cradle.
Yeah,
it's basically the trajectory at which it comes at Israeli armed vehicles is from an angle where these tanks and armored vehicles, are vulnerable and don't have defenses. So it's like every single time they're going to take out the vehicle.
Yeah, and especially that previously, when we saw missiles going to Merkava has a defense system that shoots down the missiles. But when they used this missile and it targeted the Merkava from up, we didn't see the anti-18GM missiles opening in the Merkava. But previously we saw it. So now they are using new missiles and new sophisticated missiles. And of course, whenever this war expands, we'll see Hezbollah and the other faction using new missiles. Also, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, the leader of Ansar Allah, also said last week that we use a new missile against the US, and if they did know, I am telling them, we use a new missile, so for them to think more than once to target Yemen again.
So, I think this report that is calling war between Israel and Hezbollah disastrous for Israel is just, something that was foretold already, something that the Israelis do know. They just have a lot of bluster. They're just like, no, we are going to go into Lebanon and we are going to push Hezbollah past the Litani when everybody knows that's not going to happen. But then when we talk about Lebanon, we need to talk about the internal situation as well, because that's where a lot of the pressure is more than likely not just going to come from, but likely already coming from. This is a country in the grips of a very significant economic crisis that the World Bank has described as the worst of the modern era. Poverty rate, I think, is over 70%, over 80% or something like that of the population. It's a country that is almost entirely dependent on the remittances of migrants. The GDP is over half of the Lebanese GDP remittances. There's no local industry. There's, imports, exports are severely limited in many ways. Although, on a summer weekend, you might not realize it here in Lebanon, but it is a country that is deeply in crisis. And that's what Western officials, who keep coming here, and they seem to be keenly aware of this, because they come and they seem only to be pursuing Israeli interests. You need to push Hezbollah back. You need to give the Lebanese army, whose salaries are paid by the U.S., by Qatar, by Saudi Arabia, whoever is, that month's donation, whoever has to donate that month. It's sadly, is the reality of this country. And so, when we talk about Hezbollah, their military capabilities, for sure. Their missiles can reach all the way down to Haifa. They can take out anything. But then the question becomes, what will happen to Lebanon? What will happen to the country of Lebanon? That, and will there be, internal disputes?
To your point, yes, Lebanon is in severe crisis, but let's be honest, it's, this is a country that's worked without reliable daily electricity and water supply for decades before the crisis, when it was awash with funds. What I want to say is that a war with Lebanon, one anticipates, will pretty much be mutually assured destruction. But the Lebanese have lived through decades of this and will crawl out of the rubble and rebuild. This is in terms of contiguity, this land has never been empty. It has been populated for thousands of years through wars and crusades and what have you, and it will continue to be so. But Israel is a sort of fake construct, okay, where artificial borders have been created that are disputed from the get-go, and foreign populations have been injected into the state. Who's not going to leave? Mutually assured destruction will nonetheless keep, Lebanon will take on somehow. But Israel will no longer exist because Israel relies on the Aliyah, the movement of Jews and the settlement of Jews into Israel in order for it to continue growing. And the opposite will happen. Then what happens? You only get the crazies left behind. And that's another story. So what do you think about this?
Yeah,
the repercussions on Lebanon?
Economically, not only Lebanon is facing a crisis, we have many countries in the region, including Yemen and including Syria, including also Iran and Iraq. But we see the factions or these countries are retaliating and facing the US and the UK that are supporting Israel in the Red Sea. And of course, the Iraqis are facing the Americans directly in Iraq. But the situation in Lebanon is different because Hezbollah will have a problem in Lebanon if they faced Hezbollah in an all-end war. Because internally, the Lebanese people, unfortunately, they are not united. And even the government ministers, even, you see a minister saying that we don't want war, and you see another minister who says we want war. So this will create an internal conflict in Lebanon. And in 1975, when the Lebanese war erupted, which was a civil war, it was called a civil war, we saw factions that fought on behalf of Israel. And these factions are still in the government, and they have also supporters. So I don't know if in an upcoming war, we see Lebanese going to the streets also fighting Hezbollah internally, as Israel will fight Hezbollah on the border.
One thing that should be pointed out, we are now seeing a convergence of the Muslim view of the regional situation in Lebanon that hasn't existed since 2005. And the assassination of Hariri, where, you have a third of the population or more is Shia, a third of the population or more is Sunni, and then the remaining Christian and then other smaller sects. And this is a country that is very much talks in terms of sects, which is disturbing, but another story. To have the Sunni majority in this country, of course, rise in support of their fellow Sunni in Palestine is a changing of the scene. They're 100% against Israel. Who's fighting Israel? Not Samir Jaja, not Joseph Aoun and the Lebanese army, but Hezbollah. So I see this on the street every day with people who would, disparage Hezbollah in conversation, who are now 100%. It's shocking to see this. This is the first time I've seen it in the 12 years I've been here.
But Sharmeen, that the only sect in Lebanon, which is the Sunni sect, they are the only ones that don't have a leader nowadays in Lebanon. So that's why their opinion is swinging right and left. And of course, they support Palestine. Historically, they did. And now, if you go to the streets in major Sunni areas, they will say that we support what Hezbollah is doing. And that's, we saw it on TV, we saw it on social media. But now, what happened is that Mr. Saad Hariri is coming back. I don't think that the Gulf countries and the West pushed Saad Hariri to come back because I'm 100% he didn't take that decision. Okay, some people told him go back to Lebanon. Maybe he's coming back to Lebanon to say, "Oh, Lebanon, we are a small country. We support Palestine, but we don't need war." But if he says that, within 24 hours, the whole Sunni street will shift.
I don't think that's entirely true because we have seen Saad Hariri say things before, and it doesn't move the streets entirely. Okay, so the Sunni street has been without Saad Hariri for a while now. It's not clear. we're talking the entire Arab world. In a poll that the Cradle covered just last week, the Arab Barometer poll, has rallied, saying the vast majority of Arabs in the Arab world today are saying Palestinian cause is not just a Palestinian cause; it is a cause of the Arabs. We've not seen this in yonks, So you cannot anticipate the Sunni street in Lebanon. They are going to be with Palestinians. 100%.
But
and Assad Hariri will not be so foolish as to go against Hezbollah when his constituents are impassioned right now. It's insane. Did you see the pictures of the demonstration, the mass crowds in Egypt over the weekend for Palestine? I mean, mass. I haven't seen anything like this since. Did we even see this big in Tahrir Square? I don't remember. And then in Yemen, while they're getting bombed, a million people come out. The Palestinian cause has gone front and center. It is the cause in the Arab world. And leaders who are quiet about it or are against it or secretly dealing with Israel are hemorrhaging credibility right now. None of them are going to call against a war with Israel if the street is. Yeah. They're unable to.
And I agree with you, Sharmeen, about the streets, about like the feeling here in the streets of Lebanon that it used to be always, everything that was wrong with this country was Hezbollah's fault.
Yeah.
If the power went out, it's because of Hezbollah's weapons. Yeah. If my taxi was late, it's because of Hezbollah's weapons. But now it's just like this, because there's a bigger enemy. There's a bigger enemy, and all of a sudden people have either stopped saying that, or they've actually reconsidered their positions. And
we haven't been saying a lot of statements. You normally in this kind of situation, you have that sort of the pro-American crowd who come in and sort of steal the narrative and start talking about, the problems Hezbollah are causing for us. But we're not seeing a lot.
Sami Jameel says a lot. So he's always coming out and saying like some ridiculous statement. But even his followers make fun of him.
I mean, they got 30,000 votes in the election, in the entire country, not this election, but the one before.
And just, and to the point about the poll, because, this shifted entirely, like you said, this has become an Arab issue. In 2022, 76% of respondents in about 16 Arab countries, they said that the Palestinian cause was an Arab issue, while 16 said no, it's a Palestinian issue. After the Gaza war, 92% of Arabs say this is an Arab issue, and only 6% say this is a Palestinian issue. More likely than not, the Gulf monarchies are taking up that 6%. And then there's also the comments from Amir Abdullahian, the Iranian foreign minister, a few days ago. He says that if Israel were to launch an attack on Lebanon, like an actual offensive against Lebanon, that would mean the end of Netanyahu. He singled him out. He said that would be the end of Netanyahu. Now, I don't actually know what he means, because Iran has been hands off so far in regards to Gaza. They put out a lot of statements. They don't take a lot of action because I feel like it's also a very political situation for them, as it is a political situation for Lebanon.
But also, as you said, that Palestine is an Arab issue. And we know that Iranians, they are not Arabs, although they are Muslims, but they help the resistance. And without Iran, we won't see a 7 October, we won't see a win in 2006 against Israel. We won't see that there's a resistance in Iraq fighting or even shooting a bullet on the U.S. troops, and even the know-how that they gave to Yemen. So I think Iran did a good job for the resistance, but as you said, I think their announcement make the people think that they will go all in if anything happens. And when 7 October happened, some people were frustrated, I think.
Okay, let me interject something. I agree with this. I do hear a lot of frustration. Why isn't Iran doing anything? Iran is the head of the axis of resistance. It's all talk. But here's the thing to consider. And Iran is, this is the country of the carpet weavers, and this is, one of the places where chess came into being, right? A strategic game. Why would you bring a state into this fight and make your enemy have a very clear target, right? If Syria or Iran, the two state members of the Axis resistance, participate in this war directly, then the Americans and the Israelis, et cetera, would have very clear targets, okay? When they're not in the war, the Americans and Israelis really can't strike at these countries except through, like,
or sanctions.
Sanctions, subversion, or sabotage, assassinations. But, as we talked about last week, it is because the war between the U.S. and Israel and the other side is between non-state actors. They don't have very clear targets, the Americans and Israelis. And so consider the cleverness of Iran's position right now. Aid these parties as best you can. Try to de-escalate conflict and achieve a ceasefire in Gaza and achieve a push for a long-term Palestinian solution. But don't get involved directly, because then if it's a war against a state, a single state, it becomes much harder for the resistance axis. So it's actually a clever posture, and one that Iran is likely to maintain for the foreseeable future, because there's nothing more. Let's be honest. I think when you're on social media, Americans now are saying, there's nothing more that Israel wants us to drag us into a war with Iran. You hear this refrain quite a lot, and that is exactly right. So why should Iran give Israel that?
Good point. No, true.
They
agree.
And just
they have to lower the tone of their statements. That's it.
No, well, it is irritating. People who have to cover your or the geopolitics of the region every day and see constant Iranian statements of you're going to lose, we're going to win, and then nothing delivered. But we also don't know what goes on behind the scene. Let's say that the sources, reaching sources during a period of conflict on the axis of resistance is very, very hard. I mean, they really put the screws on those things, and I think any Western journalist even recognizes. But just to the point on Iran and the Arab Barometer poll, something very interesting. The U.S. has spent decades, and its allies, Saudi Arabia in particular, spent decades and well over $100 billion propagandizing the region against Iran, against Shiites and Shiism, and to a great degree of success. But the poll from the Arab Barometer last week shows that Arab public opinion of the international and regional positions of various states, the U.S., 97% of the Arab world views the U.S.'s position in this region as very bad or bad. 97%. 97. And 37% view Iran's position as bad or very bad. 97 to 37%. Every day the Israelis bomb Gaza, Iran, the public opinion of Iran goes up and public opinion of the Americans goes down. And it really ties the hands of the U.S. allies in this region. They're not going to be able to participate in war, even if it's funny, the Arabs who have, been fully propagandized and don't like Iran and considered a malign actor in this region. I always say, if the U.S. strikes Iran, many of those people will be like, yay. But if Iran strikes the U.S. back, they will really cheer. It's like seeing a Muslim country do something. It's something they want to see in this region. They want to see that action. In the other poll we talked about last week, Arabs were saying that they've already beaten Israel. Do you remember that?
That Israel has already.
That Israel has already lost. So really perceptions are changing, because now you're seeing, not these 6-day wars and the entire countries are defeated. You're seeing prolonged wars by regular people who stand up for their rights and have taken up arms. And this is I don't think the old formulas work. I don't think the 3% of Arabs who are with the Americans or Israelis can go on TV and say anything like they were before.
This is such a small number that at some point it just becomes a rounding error. How many of them are there actually? And also, to your point, Karim, like we were talking about Lebanon, what kind of pressure can be exerted, sanctions, whatever, There's also media. there's also the media. Sometimes we forget about this, the media manipulation. And this exists across the entire world. Here in the Arab world is just as present. These news stations that are, their buildings are like, a stone throws away from the U.S. Embassy. They get all of the reports directly, from the State Department. This is the truth in Latin America. This is the truth in Africa. This is the truth in South Asia. There's this level of control, and what you're saying, to control the narrative.
They also control the singers and the actors. It's not only for people that are going.
But I don't understand this point really, because what I'm saying is nobody can go against Gaza in this political climate. No Arab leader, no Arab member of parliament, no Arab media commentator. It's a very unpopular position, and the polls are showing it. So what kind of pushback, can we actually get? I don't think, I'm not seeing pushback in Lebanon. Even though the Lebanese are scared and worried about a war with Israel, you're not getting the same, ferocious roar of an opposition.
Yeah, I'm with you, but what I'm saying is that this 3% are the ruling class in the Arab world.
And they've shut up.
Yeah.
Because the target is Gaza. It's
Saudi Arabia.
not Israel, Lebanon, right? Because of Gaza, because what's happening.
In Saudi Arabia, you can't protest against Israel.
Yeah.
Or support with Gaza. Same in the UAE.
Okay, but what are the polls we saw in Saudi Arabia? The why not?
Yeah,
they showed that the majority of Saudis, vast majority, 90-something%, are against normalization with Israel. So it doesn't really. What I'm saying is, the fact that this is happening in Gaza, the fact that Palestine has come back as the number one Arab cause, it's back on the map completely, has really, rendered impotent many of the Arab leaders, many of the spokesmen, really, for the American side in this region. There's nothing they can say about that. They can criticize Hezbollah when there's a Hezbollah-Lebanon clash. They can criticize Iran when Iran's in Syria. Nobody can say anything about Gaza. This is Palestine,
Yeah.
Let me bring something up from this poll, and that is that since the start of the Gaza war, all of a sudden the United States has become is now considered the biggest threat to peace and stability in the region. In 2022, it was Israel. It beat out the U.S. by 2 points, 2%, 39% for the U.S., 41% for Israel. After the Gaza war, is 51% for the U.S. and 26% for Israel.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because it's the United States who is supporting Israel, not just militarily, but also politically and by the media. And, by this narrative that is, poor Israel. They got 55 9/11s in one day. And then the Palestinians, well, they're human animals, because that's the rhetoric.
Yeah. But do you think now, one of the refrains of the resistance axis has been, like, Israel doesn't lead this show. It is the Americans who lead Israel, which a lot of people in this region don't really think that way. But suddenly that resistance axis rhetoric, fingering the Americans as the main aggressor in the region, and that Israel just follows its lead, is taking hold, which surprised me, because this poll clearly shows fewer Arabs thinking Israel is the main threat to security in the region, and more Arabs thinking the Americans are.
And let me just point this out, because this poll it was conducted by the Arab Center, Washington, D.C., in cooperation with the Arab Center for Research and Policy Studies. These are U.S. institutions. This is a U.S. poll conducted in the region. The reality of the situation can no longer be hidden. It really can no longer be hidden. Just how badly the political points, how much the U.S. has lost since October 7th here.
A lot. And, the polls don't get covered so much, but also this Israeli report on Israel being in a nightmare, losing situation in the war with Hezbollah. This is a report, 6 Israeli think tanks, 100 top advisors, politicians, military commanders, etc. And the prime minister would not give them an audience to hear this poll. Plausible deniability. This is it's insane. The people, the decision makers, are not wanting to listen to what's happening, and they're on a trajectory of win or die.
Well, yeah, it seems which one they're picking, no?
Yeah.
The winning seems to be impossible. Not seems.
Yeah.
It is impossible. There's no really exit strategy for Israel because they don't want a ceasefire. They don't want to find a diplomatic way out of this. They just want to keep using the bombs and their jets and their navy. And it reminds me of the former ombudsman of the Israeli army, Yitzhak Brick, who's been saying for the past 5 years, I think, that Israel cannot fight a ground war, that they become an Israeli Air Force army, that the Israeli army is an Air Force army and that everything else is in shambles. And again, let's go back to what's happening in Gaza. We're in the 5th month of this war at this point. Almost over 30,000 killed, as far as we know, because you can't just count the bodies; you need to count the missing as well. So at least 35,000 killed, hundreds of thousands injured, millions displaced. For what? Militarily, for what? What have they achieved? And then you have these reports of Western media of Joe Biden apparently is now calling Netanyahu an asshole. That asshole, that whatever guy. He hates him,
By the way, every single U.S. president has called Netanyahu either a liar or an asshole or you name it. I mean, there's reams of newspaper articles about this, and yet he seems to call the shot.
So it's like all of a sudden they just want to, switch sides or not even switch sides, just kind of like do a bit of an about face.
Yeah.
Like, okay, we were supplying, the Israeli army with these, what do they call it, bunker buster bombs that they've been dropping on residential neighborhoods, And, but actually, what? We don't like these guys. These guys, I don't like him. He's an asshole, Netanyahu.
I think this is a problem that not only the West faces, but also the resistance, that we focus a lot about Netanyahu. Because for me, as a guy who supports the resistance, it's not about Netanyahu, it's about the existence of Israel.
Zionist project.
Yeah, the Zionist project is not about Netanyahu. If Netanyahu goes, another Netanyahu will come, and that's what we saw since day one.
But the Americans feel, and they're possibly right about this, that they can stage manage any other prime minister way better than Netanyahu, that Netanyahu is unpredictable. In the same way here in Lebanon, they used to think Michel Aoun is not controlled. It's that dynamic of, and because he's a liar, they know that Netanyahu can say one thing to their face and do exactly the opposite. And that is part of his, why he's so frightening. He, more than any other Israeli leader, is prepared to groom his allies. When they say you can't do that, he'll do it and look them right in the eye. And then what are they going to do in reaction? And then this new level of atrocity becomes the new line,
Trump said that before they assassinated the Soleimani.
Yeah.
He said that the Israelis told us, we are ready to participate with you. And at the last minute, Netanyahu said no.
Speaking of Trump and Biden, what the heck was this Biden tweet today of him shooting red lasers out of his eyes? Now, I had to go in the comments to figure out that it was some reference to the Super Bowl and his position about the Super Bowl. But just Americans, nobody in the world last night, and probably a good half of your population, knew anything about the Super Bowl or were watching it. What we saw was the Israeli bombardment of Rafah. So the next morning when the American president tweets red lasers shooting out of his eyes that way, I mean, it's reminiscent of the Trump, Sisi, and King of Saudi Arabia holding on to that glowing orb. I mean, it's like, the villain, right? He looked like a villain tweeting red lasers shooting out of his eyes. What was he thinking? Oh, we saw him as, we struck Gaza because we clearly heard last night that the Americans had greenlit the Gaza bombing. Joe Biden's shooting red lasers out of his eyes over the Super Bowl. Nobody gets the connection whatsoever. We just see this very, very malign, evil U.S. president lording over a massacre.
Even if you get the connection, it's just a tone-deaf thing to do. It's incredibly tone-deaf, and it's incredibly, like Biden's already having so much issues at home. Like not just here in foreign policy, he keeps sending Antony Blinken to be humiliated by Netanyahu, I think it's like 7 times at this point. But at home, he's trailing in the polls. There was this report about him essentially forgetting even when he was vice president, this is a man.
His turnaround press conference was a disaster.
When he called Sisi the president of Mexico.
He called his son like 10 times. His son died in different countries.
Every time he says a different version of how he's...
The thing that is very eerie to me, that of course he didn't take the photo and tweet the photo. There's a team behind him that sat and said, this is a good idea.
The amount of Americans who knew that, they're going to hand over the elections to Republicans if Biden doesn't step aside and a new candidate run in his place is growing. I mean, we've heard this refrain quietly for the last year plus, and now it's becoming more deafening. They know they're going to lose if Biden runs. I mean, on various things. I mean, first of all, why did it take so long for the mainstream media to even ask the question in a press conference, sir, you're old and you're forgetful? But, before they wouldn't have even done that. They would have not addressed this issue. But the fact that they were allowed to address this issue, reporters were allowed to address this issue now, means that there's a real split in the Democratic Party and Democratic constituents on this. I think we're still may have a surprise in terms of yanking Biden from the ticket.
Because Trump is in it, for sure. Like, he keeps winning the primaries. There's really no competition. I saw that Nikki Haley lost to a writing candidate that was none of these candidates, and she lost to that. So there's no competition on the Republican side. On the Democrat side, there doesn't seem to be anyone but Biden, literally. Well, Kamala Harris,
No, she polls even worse than Biden.
Yeah. So, but then the real question, at least for us, because this is internal U.S. politics, which is a sham overall in the end. But for us, as far as U.S. foreign policy, it really doesn't matter, if it's an elephant or a donkey on the flag of the president who's sitting, because it's always the same. And with Trump, Trump has already said that he will support Israel. The only interesting thing that I've heard from him was over the weekend, in which he apparently teased pulling out of NATO, which I think would be hilarious. I think it would be amazing.
In this sense, Trump would be a difference for us because, he would alienate much of Europe. I mean, basically, he would threaten the Atlantic Alliance, which has been our biggest threat in the region for, decades. So in that sense, plus he is, he's already, even though his tone is changing a bit, he's not interested in the Ukraine war,
Of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not. And no, and as far as NATO, we were already seeing with this whole, Operation Prosperity Guardian in the Red Sea, in which most of NATO was just docking a bit, and I hope they don't call on me because I don't want to take part of it. They've been saying it. So if all of a sudden, we were talking a few minutes ago, Israel pushes the U.S. into starting a war with Iran, who's going to come and fight it with it? Who's going to, because first of all, there's still the war in Ukraine.
Nobody.
Exactly. It's going to be U.S.
The British, the junior partner. The British.
Yeah. They're going to send, to commando units and be like, that's all we have.
Yeah.
And they can, because I don't think in this situation, the Gulf countries won't allow them to use their bases as they are allowing them to bomb other countries in the region.
The other point is, if the war expands to including a state like Iran or Syria, I actually don't think the Russians and Chinese will remain silent then.
But Russia is in Syria.
Well, yes, but I mean even the Chinese, because state to state, it's a completely different situation. Again, why I think Iran is smart to stay out of the fray, at least directly for the time being. I think the reaction of the international community would be very, very different if Iran was pulled into this war.
Well, there's still many moving parts, many things that are happening right now across the world. But I think we can leave it off at that for this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Please make sure to leave a like, to subscribe, to follow us on Instagram, on Telegram, and on X. And if you're feeling generous, please leave a donation on our Patreon for the Cradle News Roundup. My name is Esteban Carrillo. I have been joined by Karim Shami and Sharmin Narwani.